Hi, welcome back to the last chapter of The World's Worst Teachers. We are listening to Mr Phobe's fear. Mr Phobe had come into the classroom for the first time and he got covered in custard. A toilet plunger was stuck to his forehead and he was so nervous that he was stuttering. And then the children just broke him and he just screamed, "No!" And then it all went silent. Finally, silence descended upon the classroom for what was the first time in years. It was not to last. For a glorious golden moment, Mr Phobe believed he'd finally won their respect. How wrong he was. "Woo!" exclaimed the entire class. Now come on, settle down," he ordered. On Mungo's prompt, the horrors all repeated exactly what their new supply teacher had just said. "Now come on, settle down," came a chorus of replies. The teacher shook his head and rolled his eyes. "This is just stupid." "This is just stupid." "Stop repeating everything I say." "Stop repeating everything I say." "Right, that's it. I've had enough." "Right, that's it. I've had enough." Mr Phobe couldn't take it anymore. He closed his eyes. As soon as he did, he felt a tomato explode across his face. Whoosh! "Ha ha ha ha!" "No one tell him it was me who threw it," hissed a voice. "Right you are, Doobie," came a reply. "Don't!" Mr Phobe opened his eyes and began to speak slowly and softly. "I want to tell you kids something. I know it's not cool or trendy, but I became a teacher because I want to make the world a better place. You kids are the future. If I can make just one of you be the best you can be, then I can give myself a big pat on the back." His voice was growing louder as his speech gathered momentum. "So come on, kids, who's with me? Who wants to be the bestest best they can be? Who wants to learn about the Industrial Revolution?" The boys all leaped to their feet and burst into applause. In unison they shouted, "Yes!" A proud tear welled in the teacher's eye. He had turned these beasts around. "Sir," began Mungo, "I think I can speak for all of us here by saying thank you from the bottom of our hearts and the hearts of our bottoms for inspiring us." "It's my great pleasure," croaked Mr Phobe. "Let's begin the history lesson. Let's find out about the transference to new manufacturing processes from 1760 to 1840. Let's learn, let's grow. Kids, let's reach for the stars." "Let's do it," they all replied. "We can't wait to learn about the increasing use of steam and water power, the development of machine tools and the rise of the mechanised factory system," exclaimed Mungo. "Yes," replied Mr Phobe, punching the air. There we are. "Just take a seat, sir, and we can begin." Mungo's grin oozed around the classroom until it had spread across the faces of all the boys. "Kids, let's do this," proclaimed Mr Phobe, slamming himself down on the chair. Doof! Instantly he wished he hadn't. The horrors had covered the seat with hundreds of drawing pins. "Nick, nick, 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 nick." "Owie!" screamed Mr Phobe. "As well you might if you had hundreds of drawing pins stuck to your bottom." "Ha ha 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 ha!" In desperation, the teacher began hopping around the classroom. Hip, hop, hippity hop. That didn't work. Neither did jumping. Doing, doing, doing. Do not try this at home, at school or anywhere. No one likes a perforated bottom. It didn't help when he cartwheeled. Whooshed. All that this achieved was to make the brutes howl even louder with laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha! It feels like my body is on fire!" cried Mr Phobe as he charged towards the classroom door. His foot became stuck in an old tin bucket, but he carried on regardless. Clatter, clatter, clatter. "Water! Water!" he cried. As he hurried along the corridor, all the terrors followed. Clutching his bottom, Mr Phobe found the nearest bathroom. He charged inside and found the closest cubicle. With no time to lose, the teacher lifted the seat and plunged his bottom into the bowl. There's no picture of that, unfortunately. "Ah!" he sighed as the cold water lapped around his burning buttocks. Sizzle. To anyone who might be passing, Mr Phobe was quite a sight. The teacher was covered from head to toe in custard, with a tomato splattered across his face, a toilet plunger stuck to his forehead, and his bottom wedged down the loo. In no time, the swine caught up with him. One by one, their nasty little faces appeared around the corner. Ha ha ha! They all laughed. Mungo shook his head and took charge. Quiet, boys, he ordered, and they were quiet. Wonderful speech, Mrs Phobe. Thank you, he muttered, trying to make the best of the most undignified position he had found himself in. I'm so sorry this happened, Mrs Phobe. Mungo continued, clutching his chest to appear even more sincere than he sounded. That's quite all right, began the teacher. Mungo, I suppose accidents do happen, he continued, trying to put a brave face on things. But on your very first day at Hell's Bells, what rotten luck. How's your bottom now, Mrs Phobe? Still piping hot, I'm afraid. And it's Mr Phobe. That's what I said, Mrs Phobe, replied Mungo, smirking. Maybe you need some more water. Oh no, I don't think. Let me help, sir. With that, the boy reached across the teacher and pressed the flush. Plunk, splosh. No! Cried Mr Phobe. The poor man didn't stand a chance. With his bottom so far down the bowl, the suction from below dragged him downwards. Whoomph! Help! He yelled, but it was too late. Mr Phobe was flushed down the toilet. Kasplunk. Swirl, gurgle, gurgle. Farewell, Mrs Phobe! Called out the monsters. Ha ha ha! Doobie, grinning devilishly, whipped a stopwatch out of his pocket. Mr Phobe lasted a mere 4 minutes and 17 seconds at school. That's a new record, exclaimed Mungo. Well done us. Hooray! Squish, squash, squish. Finally, with the toilet plunger still stuck to his head, he found himself coming up for air. It was then that Mr Phobe realised the impossible. Things had taken a turn for the worse. The much worse. He was in a sewage plant. The teacher was swimming in a steaming pool of poo. Pongy wongy woo. No! He cried. From that fateful day forward, Mr Phobe did everything he possibly could to avoid children at all costs. The safest way, he thought, was to become a headmaster. Then he could hide in his office all day, shuffling his paperwork and not meeting any little horrors. Little horrors. Just like you. So if one day you see Mr Phobe locking himself in a locker or diving into a hedge or furiously burying himself in the football pitch, please remember something. It's not his fault. He's terrified of children. After all, Mr Phobe had once been flushed down a toilet. Kersplosh. There he is. And that's the end. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed doing all those different voices and those different characters. I found it really fun. I hope you enjoyed listening to it and didn't cringe too much. All right, bye.